Hello UK Crime Book Club. This is the first half of the recording with the Murder Squad. I have stepped in for Kaz and I'm thrilled to bits to get to take part in this. So I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. So Martin, would you like to introduce yourself first, please?
Thanks very much, and hello everyone. I'm Martin Edwards. I've published 20 novels over the years. The most recent one is The Crooked Shore, which is the 8th in the Lake District Mysteries series. I've also written books set in the 1930s, Gallows Court and Mortmain Hall, and I've edited various anthologies.
Cath.
Hello, I'm Cath Staincliffe. I've written even more novels than Martin. I've written 27, published 27. Some series, Private Eye series, Sal Kilkenny series, Blue Murder series, which was based on the television show that I created, and more recently, a run of 10 standalone novels. And the latest of those is called Running Out of Road. And that is the first time really I've left the mean streets of Manchester for the countryside. It's set in the Peak District.
Beautiful. Margaret.
Hi, and thanks for the invitation. I'm Margaret Murphy. I've published 16 novels. I had to do a quick tally there while Cath was talking. 16 novels, not all under my own name. 5 of them written under pseudonyms. 2 as Ashley Dyer and 3 as A.D. Garrett, which were forensic thrillers. But the rest under my own name. I picked up a book at random, so it's not one of my most recent books, but this one is the one I'm choosing to show you. It's actually a reprint. It was originally published under a different title, but I just thought that looked quite nice and sunny and bright. And I'm actually founder of Murder Squad as well. So I'm here as the kind of founder as well today.
So let's go in reverse order then. Margaret, tell us about how Murder Squad was founded.
Okay, so I had been, I think I'd had about 4 books published by the time that I started thinking about this. And I'd been told by my editor at the time that I'd had good reviews, but there was no budget for marketing or publicity. And unfortunately, she said, and it's quite true, good reviews don't always get you good sales. So it was extremely frustrating. And the good thing, in a sense, was that I knew other people who were in that situation. And the Crime Writers Association runs, well, it's different in the years of COVID, but we had regular meetings countrywide, but in particular, it was the Northern Chapter. And I got to know some brilliant authors in the Northern Chapter whose work I really admired. And strangely enough, 6 of those became members of Murder Squad when I finally approached them. And it's just been fantastic to have that kind of support. Initially, we set up to support each other, to promote each other's work, to do workshops, events. We produced brochures because, I mean, it was really at the time when computers were only just beginning. This is 21 years ago now. So computers were only really beginning to come to the fore in terms of publicity. But we did have our website as well, and a newsletter, which is still going today, going strong.
Cath, how did you join Murder Squad?
Well, I got approached as one of those initial people by Margaret, and I just thought it was a really brilliant idea because it's so frustrating and lonely being an author and feeling that you're not really making headway, and to be able to combine efforts with other people in the same boat and share the workload and share the sort of the embarrassment, if you like, of approaching people and saying, you know, would you like us to do an event in your bookshop or at your literary festival, or come and see what we've got to offer. So it was such a good idea, really, ahead of its time, I might say. And since then, I think we've been emulated by a lot of authors clubbing together to do the same thing, because the situation hasn't really changed. People still really struggle to get the sales to match the acclaim that their work receives. So it was a great idea, and we've formed friendships as well as had lots of successes along the way.
Martin, how did you join?
Well, it began with a phone call from Margaret when I was in my office doing my day job as a lawyer, and she explained this idea she'd had, and it sounded fantastic right from the outset. The idea of collaborating, and I think that one of the great things that Margaret did in setting up Murder Squad was to approach a number of writers who got on very well, but were different personalities, writing different types of crime fiction. So you've got a blend. And I often think in any sort of team, you need a mix of different styles, different approaches, different things you're enthusiastic about. That combination, making the whole thing greater than the sum of its parts, is really, really important in any walk of life. And this is what Margaret, I think, did with Murder Squad. She brought us all together. She's kept us in pretty good order over the last 21 years. And as Cath says, it's been great in terms of friendship and mutual support, and the kind of pleasure you get. And of course, you see this on UK Crime Book Club posts every day now. But the pleasure that you can take in the success of people you respect and admire, you always want to succeed yourself, of course you do. But it's also very uplifting to see other people and good writers getting the sort of recognition that you think that they truly deserve, and that's been one of the enduring delights of Murder Squad, and it's as much fun today as it was 21 years ago, really.
That's a really good point, Martin, because over the years, we all started out from more or less the same level, I think, as in terms of sales and recognition and profile and all the rest of it. And we're sort of that rather shameful title, mid-list author, to us. But since then, we've got two members of Murder Squad who have had the highest accolade that the Crime Writers Association can bestow, and that's the Diamond Dagger. And Martin is one of the recipients, and Anne Cleeves is the other. And of course, we know Anne Cleeves' huge success with her books and also with the TV series, 3 going at the same time. But actually, I should say that there are other members of the Murder Squad available to anyone who's listening who might be a TV producer. And Cath, of course, with her series as well, Blue Murder, which was hugely successful and had one of the highest rating values, didn't it, for quite some time. Yeah.
So tell all of the members, especially our author members, about your path to publication. Obviously, you've been writing for some years, and there are people who have maybe been writing as long and haven't had as much success, people who are just starting out. So, Martin, let's go back to you first.
Well, in terms of path to publication, it's very difficult, as we all know, to get your first book published. But I think we'd all agree that almost always it's also difficult to stay published, to stay in the game. Authors get dropped by the publishers all the time. It happens more frequently now than it did 20 years ago. It's happened to a number of us, and I do think that when you're thinking about becoming a writer and how you can sustain it, I think that the great thing is to recognise that it's a roller coaster. You have your ups and you have your downs as well, and this is where the support is really invaluable. You know other writers are going through similar experiences, not necessarily all at the same time, but you gain strength from talking to them, benefiting from their own experiences, and also how they climb back from the downs and got back on the upward trail. And I think this idea of keeping in touch with fellow writers, as well as, of course, with readers, whether it's on social media or in any other way, at events, live events, when we're allowed, is really, really important. And also not losing heart if you have a setback, because the nature of writing is, the truth is that there are lots of setbacks. It's Simenon, the creator of Maygrave, one of Europe's most successful writers of all time, who said writing is a vacation of unhappiness. Well, I wouldn't go as far as that, and it certainly didn't stop Simenon writing hundreds of books. But you do have to, I think, accept that it won't all be a linear upward progression. I think that once you embrace that reality, once you recognise that not every TV option will turn into a TV deal, and not every well-reviewed book will climb the bestseller charts, once you understand the nature of the writer's life, then that helps you to keep going and keep motivated, because motivation and confidence, keeping those things going, is really, really important to any writer, whether you're starting out or whether you're somebody who's published a lot of books. And again, it's the support of fellow writers as well, of course, as readers, that's really enormously helpful and positive.
Cath?
Oh, I don't know where to start, really. I think, like Martin says, it's a very rocky path. I've been dropped more than once by publishers because my books haven't sold enough. There've been times when I was sort of in between contracts and I never knew if I'd get published again. The financial side of it is very unrewarding in terms of writing novels. And I think that excludes a lot of people who would like to do it, but actually, could not possibly live on the sort of income that authors get. I think one thing that's kept me going is the fact that I love what I do, because I can't think of, I don't know why anybody would go into publishing, publishing books, unless it gave them something beyond the remuneration and the joy of seeing your book on a shelf. I mean, for me, the actual process is rewarding. And I know not all writers feel the same about it. And I think that helps me to keep going, because it's like, even if I don't know what's around the corner, or even if my last book didn't sell very well, at least I'm getting up every morning looking forward to what I'm going to be doing in the day. And I think that's really precious, and I'm fortunate to be in a position where I can do that. So I am grateful, but it's a hard graft, it's a hard road. And don't go into it to make money, really.
Well, if you're going to make money, then make sure you make it early, because then it seems to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? It took me 5 years to actually find my first publisher. And I think it was the third book that was accepted for publication. So as both my colleagues have said, it's not an easy path. And since then, yes, like the others here, I have been dropped by publishers. And that's part of the reason behind the name changes. It's rather complex. And I won't go into it today, but Martin's going to publish a blog about it, which I've written. So there's detail on that there. But I did want to talk about one particular book, though, that I wrote 10 years ago. And it was circulated to at least a dozen publishers. And all of them praised it to the skies. And all of them rejected it. No one wanted this book. And Reg Hill, the Pasco and DL series, had read it, and he'd given it a little kind of blurb that my agent could use to tout the book around. And I told him that it hadn't sold, and he said at the time, and these are his words, not mine, "They're fools. You should stick with it. Don't give up on it. One day it'll find a home." And it did take 10 years. But finally, when it was published, it did really well. And it did take just finding the right person at the right time. So that's another thing I would say to people is that, yes, you do have to listen to criticism. And I really enjoy, some people hate doing edits. I really enjoy the editorial process. I love getting the feedback. Although at first I might feel quite resistant to it. And in the past, I felt quite violent on occasions at some of the criticisms I've received. I always give myself time to think and to calm down and to really kind of analyze, and it's very, very useful. So the editorial process is something that I would also say to people to kind of learn to love, in a sense. But don't, if you think a book is really good and it's had good kind of feedback but doesn't sell, don't do the Stephen King thing of throwing it into a bin, which is what he did with his first novel. Keep a hold of it, come back to it in a few years or whatever it takes, and then make a more kind of cool, objective assessment of it before you decide whether you're going to ditch it or keep it, or send it out again.
One of the questions that we had from a member was asking whether you would write about COVID. Now, this has been quite a controversial thing. Some people are really comfortable with it, some people aren't. You may have already been asked this, but Martin, I'm going to come to you first. What are your thoughts on that?
In terms of a novel, I'm not ready to write about COVID. I write novels. One of the reasons is because I like escapism, and I really want to escape from any thought of COVID for a long time. I think time makes a difference. So eventually I'll be, I'm sure, interested in writing something that relates to the pandemic. And I've already touched on it in a novella that I was commissioned to write for an American publisher that's coming out next month. But really, I don't want to read novels that are about the pandemic. Absolutely not interested at present in those. In time I will be, but not yet. And I don't want to write about it. I think it was a bit like this at the time of the First World War and the Spanish flu pandemic. People took years to want to come around to reading about it, and they did eventually, but it took a long time. And it's possible we may have a similar experience, but I think it's pretty raw in the experience of many people, particularly, of course, those who suffered themselves, had family members suffering terribly in the pandemic. It's pretty raw, and I think having the distance of time will be a good thing. That's my personal take on it.
And before I ask you, Cath, I do just want to send our love to Peter Boone, who is one of our authors, who is currently recovering at home, being looked after, and thinking of you, Peter. Cath?
Yeah. I think I feel very similar to Martin, really. And I also feel like we're still in the middle of it. You know what I mean? I think sort of some people are talking as though that's something that's behind us, and I really, really don't feel like that at the moment. So I think I'd need a bit of distance, and it's a bit unusual for me because I think a lot of my fiction looks at really sort of hot contemporary topics. I sort of tend to write about the things that are disturbing me or annoying me or getting me sad or angry about the society we're living in and what is happening to people. So it feels quite odd to be, standing back from that. But like I say, I just feel I'm still living through it, and I don't know where we're going to end up yet. So yeah, not yet, but I'm sure I will eventually.
Yeah, I think it really is difficult to get that objectivity while we're in the midst of it. For me, I had to shield right the way through. So I felt, I'm not a particularly adventurous person, but I do like to get out and about. And I was being told to stay at home. And it you know, for a lot of people, I think it's been a very scary time. So it's difficult to be objective in that situation. And it's difficult to have the kind of what if scenario when you're in the midst of something that's very real and very grim and has touched, you know, I'm sure everyone here has known someone who's been very ill with it or perhaps even died of it. And it's just so difficult to, I suppose, to use that as a form of entertainment. And I'm sure, I mean, I've loved reading just recently books about Second World War, and particularly about the changes that people went through as the Second World War was kind of a threat in the distance, just coming closer and closer and closer. But I'm not sure that people would have been able to write about it in such a meaningful way in the midst of what was happening. It seems that these books were written sort of 5 to 10 years after the Second World War. And I think you get that objectivity with the distance of time.
One of the things that I like to ask is, what was the last scene that you wrote, if you can tell us without giving spoilers? So Martin, what are you working on at the moment, and what was the last scene that you wrote?
Well, I've just finished a novel, which is the third in the Rachel Savonay book set in 1930, a book called Blackstone Fell. So at the moment, I'm planning the next novel. The last scene I wrote, therefore, was the climax to Blackstone Fell.
Well, you can't tell us.
So I absolutely, my lips are sealed. But I do like getting to the end of a novel. I like that very, very much. I tend to write books with quite elaborate plots, and so I find myself getting more excited as I get towards the end and get the chance to kind of pull it all together, pull the different strands together. So I loved writing those last few chapters of Blackstone Fell, and I think they're amongst the better chapters I've written over the years, and I'm currently awaiting my editor's verdict because the manuscript's gone off. So I'm waiting to see what she thinks about it. But I'm hopeful, because it was a book that I really loved writing, and I just hope that she loves reading it and that other people will too.
Cath.
Okay, so I've just started a new novel, which is centered around the discovery of the remains of a young student who went missing at a festival in the Yorkshire Dales in 1997, and her remains are found. And so obviously, you know, it's an investigation into what happened to her. And the last scene I have written is an account of that young woman's mother finally being able to plan a funeral for her daughter. So, yeah.
So a very powerful scene.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I think because a lot of my work focuses on the impact of crime on people rather than necessarily the investigation into what happened and who done it. So in order to explore that, I'm very much interested in, you know, those sort of very emotional experiences that people have as witnesses or bereaved relatives or suspects even. Yeah. So, yeah. If it makes me cry, I think I've done a good scene.
Margaret.
Well, I've just finished a very long short story, which it's supposed to be 10,000 max, and it's about 12,000. The short story isn't my great strength, I have to say. So this particular story I can't really tell you what the last scene was because there's a big twist in the tale. So it's the twist in the tale that I've written. I can tell you that I'm about to start, literally tomorrow, start editing. I set a novel aside that I'd just finished. So I'm going to start editing that after a month away from it. And the last scene in that was a scene between two brothers who have established a kind of rapprochement after a gap of around 10 years. But there is a lot that they go through to get to that point. A lot of distrust, a lot of enmity almost, a lot of recriminations, and both brothers have to some degree been wrong about each other. So I just enjoyed the kind of revelations that came out on both sides at that point in the novel.
So I'd like to ask you all to tell us a memorable moment for you as an author. Now, you must have a few, but something that stands out for you. Martin?
Well, it's I've loved being an author, and I still do. So, despite what I said about all the setbacks, I absolutely love it. So there have been many moments, including many with friends in Murder Squad. I suppose I'm bound to say that the biggest moment was last year when I received the Diamond Dagger, but I was the first person not to attend the glitzy ceremony with a big dinner and everybody there, because of course it was in the middle of the lockdown. But our very good friend Anne Cleeves, herself a former Diamond Dagger winner, presented it to me virtually. So I was the first person to receive in the world to receive the Diamond Dagger while sitting in my loft, and that was certainly a memorable moment for me, if nobody else.
Cath?
Well, I'd like to mention too, I absolutely have to pick the moment when Margaret and I were judged joint winners of the short story Dagger. I mean, first of all, I didn't think in a million years that I would win, and we were sat at the same table together at the awards ceremony in London. But the pleasure and the joy of winning together, you know, it's a bit like those two athletes who shared the gold medal at the Olympics recently. It was just brilliant because I thought Margaret's story was amazing. So that was one absolutely massive high. And I think a much quieter moment, but something that for me represents what's most amazing about being an author, was getting an email from somebody who'd read my novel, Letters to My Daughter's Killer, which is about somebody trying to come to terms with the fact that her daughter has been murdered, that the culprit is now in prison, but she still can't move beyond the sort of fury and anger and grief. And she begins to write to the man who is responsible. And this woman wrote to me, and she had actually been in a really similar situation. Her daughter had been murdered. And she said, I don't know what on earth made me pick your book up off the library bookshelf. You think I wouldn't want to read anything like that in a million years. But she actually found it really cathartic to read the novel, and she felt that I captured some of the emotions that she had felt over that period of time, you know, accurately enough, which is, I mean, I just felt so humble really hearing that, because it's like sort of, you know, for her to contact me and to tell me that was just absolutely amazing. So yeah, so those moments when people come up to you, and whether it's, you know, just, oh, I loved your last novel, or I like your books, or something more intimate, more personal like that, it's just priceless.
Yeah, I think that novelists can actually give a sense of release, can't they, to people who perhaps haven't been able to articulate the way that they feel, or feel that other people haven't understood what a traumatic event like that has meant to them. And it's I think it's a wonderful thing, and I must say that Cath's novels really do that. I mean, you've dealt with some really difficult subjects, Cath, and yet always with compassion and always in a way that's made me individually think again about my attitude and my approach to some things. But coming back to the question, yes, I was absolutely going to say that moment when we were both called up, because it was the first time that CWA had ever given two people an equal prize. And I couldn't believe how emotional I was, actually. I was shaking. I think I might have been crying at one point, but it was a very emotional occasion. But it was just fantastic. There's actually a picture of me and Cath beaming at the camera, and we were both delighted for each other, really, when we were both awarded the short story dagger. And I would like to mention a similar experience to Cath, which was a woman. Actually, she was at a reading at one of the libraries in Wirral, and she said to me that her mother had suddenly started to go blind, and she'd given up on everything, because the one thing, she was quite old, and there was the one thing that she enjoyed doing was reading, and then she couldn't read anymore. And then this woman said to me that she'd discovered my books on audio, and it had given her mother that kind of impetus. She wanted to listen to all of those books. So it gave me chills when she told me, and I felt quite humbled by it, honestly.
That's really lovely. You've all got some great stories. And we have come to the end of our half an hour. That has been a very brief time together. Would you like to give people a reminder of some books and a little bit about yourself so they know where to go and look for books and what to buy? Martin?
Well, I've written most recently 2 series, The Lake District Mysteries, The Crooked Shore being the latest example, just published last month, and also the Rachel Savnake stories, 2 of those so far, Gallows Court and Mortmain Hall.
Cath?
Yeah, so Running Out of Road is my latest novel, and there we are, which is a standalone, and it's quite different from me because it's about an 11-year-old girl who's kidnapped by her estranged father on her way home from school, and he drives her off into the hills, and their paths collide with a number of other people in the Peak District, some of whom are running from justice and some of whom are seeking it. So it's about those chance encounters that people have and how lives bump into each other and things change. And so it's a bit of a sort of chase story, I suppose. Before that, my latest series, if you like, which has been optioned for TV, features 2 women cops, Donna and Jade, and their first outing was in The Girl in the Green Dress, and their second was Quiet Acts of Violence. And they're based in Manchester. They're very different from each other, very different backgrounds, but they're developing this sort of friendship, I think, as time goes on, and investigating cases in the city.
Margaret?
So the one that I mentioned earlier, which is Before He Kills Again, particularly because it took so long to get there. And also I've just had published fairly recently the 3rd in the Jeff Rickman series, which is a police series based in Liverpool, and that one's called Don't Scream.
Thank you all so much for joining us and pre-recording the first half. I'm going to hand over to Kaz for the second half.
Thanks.
And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm very happy to introduce you to the second half of the Murder Squad, who are joining us for a short interview today. So they're going to start us off by introducing themselves and telling us a little bit about their book, starting with Anne at the top.
Hi, yeah, my name's Anne Cleeves, and I've been writing for a very long time. I'm the author of the Vera and the Shetland series, and more recently, the Two Rivers series, which is set in North Devon, which is where I grew up. And I've got a new book out very soon, which is called The Heron's Cry, and that's the second in the Matthew Venn series.
Lovely. And Chris?
Hi, my name's Chris Sims, and I'm based just outside Manchester, which is the city where the majority of my novels are set. And I have a kind of core series that is based around D.I. Spicer, who works for the major incident team for the Greater Manchester Police. And then alongside that series, I've done occasional standalones and the occasional supernatural thriller, as well as the short stories that I think we're going to be talking about in a bit.
Yeah, lovely. And Kate?
I'm Kate Ellis. I live not far from Chris, actually, but my main series featuring D.I. Wesley Peterson is set in South Devon. I've also done a series set in Thinly Disguised York, featuring Joe Plantagenet. That's a spooky series. And also a historical trilogy set in the aftermath of the First World War. I've just, my latest Wesley Peterson book, The Stone Chambers, just been published.
So start us off by telling us a little bit about how the Murder Squad came about.
I suppose I'm one of the only founder members here, because you spoke to the other founders in the earlier part of the. It all came about through Margaret Murphy. She was getting really brilliant reviews, doing very well, but just not selling books. And I think we've all been at the bottom of the heap at one point or another, and I certainly was then. And I think we felt that publishers really, they've got this mantra that marketing spend follows sales, which is very counterintuitive, because it means that if you're not selling, they're not going to spend any money on marketing you. And how are you going to sell? So Margaret very cleverly decided we had to do something about that ourselves. And so a group of us got together and we pitched to libraries and bookshops and did events. And this was all pre-digital age. So we put together a brochure and we did a CD with some readings. And yeah, and mostly though, it's about friendship. It's about supporting each other through the bad times and celebrating together when it all works well.
Yes, I'm a more recent, well, Chris and I are more recent converts to the Murder Squad, but it's been fantastic being in it. And as Anne said, we support each other, do events together, and just recently the anthology, which is out on the 26th of August. In fact, I've got the cover here. And it's 21 stories to celebrate Murder Squad's 21st birthday. And the stories are all written by members, past and present, and it's a fantastic anthology.
And several unpublished anywhere else as well. I think
that's right. Yes,
exclusive stories for this anthology. So there's quite a lot of new material in there that's not appeared anywhere until the launch of the book.
Wow. So we've got the 6 members that we've talked to today. Who are the other past and present members who are included in the anthology?
One of them is Chas Brenchley, who was a founder member, and he was a Newcastle writer, but also writes science fiction, sort of steampunk stuff as well. But he's got a really, really strong story in here. And he left the group because he got married and moved to the States. So he's now living in California. And then John Baker, who just used to set his books in York, and he's kind of just retired really, but he's got one of his stories in. And then the third member was Stuart Pawson, who I think most of us remember very, very fondly, and he died. So yeah, we've included stories by all 3 in the book to celebrate the older members as well.
So we gathered some questions before we gathered you all together here that we're going to ask you, and some of them are our favourite group questions. One of which is, what was the last scene that you wrote without giving away any spoilers?
The last scene that we wrote.
Yeah,
Okay.
the last thing that you wrote without giving away any spoilers, if you can do it. So you can have it out if it would give away a spoiler.
Yeah, I can remember because I did it this morning. So I've got a new Vera book I've just submitted, and I'm just putting together a few ideas for a new Matthew Venn book. So it's not really being written yet because I'm still waiting. I've just had the edits back for the new Vera. So this is set in autumn, a stormy autumn day in a North Devon village. And it's a stranger bursts in to the local pub. So that's it.
Wow.
Chris? So I'm quite old-fashioned. I'm not sure if any other Murder Squad members write their novels by hand to begin with and then type it all up, but that's what I do. So I'm currently typing up a standalone novel that hopefully I'll be bringing out later in the year or possibly early next year. But the act of typing up, you always slightly edit things as you go along anyway. And so the scene I was typing up today, I've typed 7,000 words today, which I'm very pleased with because I'm trying to get it all typed up by the end of this month. And it's a kind of essentially a stalker, and he's tracked his victim onto the trams in Manchester and sat down behind her, and then she's talking on the phone to a very good friend and saying how her life is being ruined by this freaky person who keeps on contacting her, and it shatters his delusions quite heavily because he was thinking up until that point all of these messages were actually being were kind of wooing her and were mysterious and romantic, and in actuality they're freaking her out. So he hears from her mouth what she really thinks about him, and that tips him over the edge. So then we get into the nasty violent phase of the book. So that's what I was typing up today.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I haven't actually been working on my novel today. I've just got the edits back from the next Wesley Peterson book, which is set in South Devon, and it involves a murder on a cliff path, a possible stalker, and the discovery of a Roman villa. And the last paragraph that last section I wrote was at the end, where Wesley acquires a dog.
Oh, wow.
Marvellous.
That's not giving too much away, I hope.
We know he's acquired a dog. One of the member questions that they wanted to ask you is, would you write about COVID or lockdown in any of these?
Well, I have, if I can jump in first. The novel I released, well, it was earlier this year actually, and it because of the way the certain aspects of the plot, it became impossible for me not to mention the whole pandemic, because a lot of the plot centers around homeless people in Manchester, and obviously the homeless community was very badly affected by the lockdown, and there was the campaign I think called No One Left, and they tried to give beds to all homeless people nationwide. So I needed to mention it, but it baffled me for a long time how to weave it into the novel without it taking over. So I got some very good advice actually from my fellow Murder Squad members, just to sort of weave it in but not be too specific. So yes, it plays a part, but hopefully it doesn't dominate.
Well, I've woven it in a rather unusual way. In the stone chamber, inspired by how you feel during lockdown, I've got a medieval anchoress who's confined to a cell attached to a church. So it's not directly linked to COVID, but it was sort of that lockdown experience, only medieval.
Yeah, I started writing it in the book that I've just submitted, and it just seemed to be distracting somehow. So I ended up taking out all references, and I'm still not sure whether that was a good idea or whether I could have done it better or be more subtle with including them. But I think my agent thought that it was best to take them out. And having reread it, I think she was probably right. But I'm still not entirely sure. So I just moved it back to 2019, which I think lots of us have done.
Yes.
just rewound it by those.
Yeah, just taking it back a year.
Yeah.
I think that's what we've asked this question. It comes up quite a lot with a whole range of authors, and a lot of people are sort of erring towards not including it.
Yeah.
At the
I
moment.
think it's hard because it changes so quickly that you could write something that's very relevant when you're writing it, but in the 18 months later when it finally gets published, or 2 years even from when you start writing, it might not actually work at all. Then it might be really out of date. I think if you could get it out very quickly, I think, Chris, you get your books out very quickly, don't you? Then that would work, but possibly not when my publishers are quite slow in turning a book around.
Yeah, it has been a major disruption, I think, from a writing perspective, along, of course, with all the other perspectives. Yeah.
So one of our other favourite group questions is your most memorable moments as an author.
Well, I've had some great times. I'll go in while the others are thinking. Just traveling, because I love traveling. And so I think I was so lucky. I got to India just before the lockdown. We're talking COVID. So the end of January last year, I was at the Jaipur Book Festival and the Kolkata Festival as well. And just so much light and colour. And I'd never been to India before. It was something that my husband Tim had been loads of times, and we had always planned that we would go together, but he died before we could do it. So it was so lovely to be able to go and experience that, and then come back to lockdown after a blast of heat and joy.
Kate, do you want to?
Oh, I've had some wonderful events, like doing murder mysteries at the Athenaeum Club in Liverpool, and Slaughter in Southwold and Beverley, where they had brilliant actors doing my murder mystery, and just all library visits, and then receiving the dagger in the library as well. That was a wonderful evening. Yeah, I've just got a lot of happy memories, really.
I'll rewind right the way back to my kind of early career as a writer. So I'd just had my first book. An offer had just been made for my debut novel by Orion, but they were wanting a synopsis for a second novel, and I had the meeting with them later on that week, and I remember very vividly being in the little attic room in the house we used to live in at that point, and I had my first child, was just a few months old, and she was on one arm, and my wife was exhausted, she was asleep, and I was with one finger was typing out the synopsis for my second novel to take down to Orion to try and seal the 2-book deal. And I remember that very clearly, thinking there must be better ways of coming up with a synopsis than this tiny newborn on my arm. But yeah, I got the deal, so it worked in the end.
That's great. So my favourite question to ask at any author chat is, would you make a graphic novel or a comic version of one of your books?
No, because my books, I'm so much inside the heads of the characters, because I write from different points of view. So I'll choose 3 or 4 points of view to write from. And I can't see how you would do that as a graphic novel. It would you'd miss that internal monologue that I enjoy doing so much.
Yeah, I can't see mine as a graphic novel either, really.
Yeah, I love in my day reading 2000 AD and those sorts of those comics and dipped into graphic novels, and yeah, I'd be very interested. I'd love to see how it would work out, because it's just that interesting, that process of seeing a novel visualized in some way. And I know lots of writers dream of having novels made into the screen, a screen version made, but I think a graphic novel would be very interesting as well. Obviously, someone else would need to plot it out and draw it, but yeah, I'd love to see how it was done.
Yeah, I'm a massive nerd. It's why I always ask the question. I love graphic novels. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I have had stuff on the screen, and that is a very different experience because you can't see what people are thinking. It's just down to the skill of the actor who would just with one glance or a gesture or the way the director films it shows you what they're thinking. And it's a very different skill, I think. I don't think I have it. I'm too wordy.
But I mean, a few graphic novels have been turned into films, haven't they? And again, I suppose you're not getting that internal monologue as you were just mentioning, Anne. But I love the way things are converted and changed into different forms. Yeah, it's a good process.
I suppose it's a little bit different for Anne, but do you cast your books in your head? I mean, you've got one on screen, but do the actors in yours sort of really portray them as you would imagine the characters?
It's just a very different form. So I just give it up very happily to the director and the actors to do what they want with. That way we all get on very well because I'm not interfering. So.
I mean, I watched the adaptations of both, and I think the characters are all excellent in it.
Yeah, no, I do. I think I've just been very lucky with all 3 that it's the same production company that are making on 3. I think they understand the way I write too. But what about Chris and Kate? Do you have actors that you would love to play your characters?
I was just going to ask them that.
Sometimes I see an actor and I think, oh, he'd make a nice Wesley. Chiwetel for, I think, make a lovely Wesley.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I see a big Scouse actor, is that, or Jerry. But haven't thought about it too seriously.
Yeah, I had the same thing for me in terms of seeing a real life person and thinking, my God, that's my character. And D.I. Spicer, he's quite a big sort of burly detective who tends to be quite physical and less kind of cerebral. And it's going back a few years, but there was a rugby player who used to play for England, and I just remember watching England one time on the telly and just going, oh my God, that's D.I. Spicer on the rugby pitch. The player since retired, but yeah, he always stuck in my mind as being who I imagined D.I. Spicer to look like.
What was the player's name?
He was called. Now you can put me on the. He's put me on the. It was Joe, and his surname will come to me as soon as everyone's not looking at me. He used to play for Wasps. He used to be captain of Wasps rugby club and played for England. I wanted to say Joe Marler, but that's wrong. He's the prop playing at the moment. It'll come to me. I'll let you know.
So tell us a little bit more about the stories in the anthology. Can you tell us something about your stories in there, each of you? Do they all have a combining thread as well? I
don't think they do they? They're all very, they're all a mishmash. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we should each describe the story that hasn't been published elsewhere.
Yeah.
Would that be a plan? Go on,
yeah.
Someone go first. I'm trying to think of this rugby player's name.
Go ahead, Kate.
Well, one of my stories was inspired by a visit to a vineyard in Holmfirth. My youngest son bought me and my husband as a present this visit to this vineyard in Yorkshire. And we went there and we stayed the night in these apartments they had. And in one of the other apartments, there was a raucous hen party going on. And that gave me the idea for Fox and the Hens. And part of it's done from the point of view of a fox after the hens. But is it a fox, or is it a human being after one of the hens? So that's one of mine.
I'm trying to envisage a vineyard in Yorkshire.
Oh yeah, it's very good. Holmfirth Vineyard, lovely.
I shall have to go and visit.
Definitely.
The new story that I've got actually does feature COVID, and it's called Wild Swimming, and it's set in Cullercoats, which is very close to where I live here in northeast England, in Whitley Bay. And it was triggered because both my girls are passionate sea swimmers, and Sarah, my oldest daughter, did a daily dip without a wetsuit every day in January to raise funds for a midwife friend. She's a midwife. A friend of hers works in the West End of Newcastle, very deprived area, and they can get donated cribs and cots, but they need new mattresses to go in them for newborns. So they were raising money for mattresses. And I thought she was absolutely bonkers, because sometimes there was actually ice and frost on the shore and they still went in.
Yeah. I know a couple of people who do that sort of thing. Yeah. My short story, The Passenger, is based on a couple who go for a day on the beach, and they have got certain kind of xenophobic views about other people on the beach, and the female of the couple is snoozing on a lilo in the sort of shallows and falls asleep and is swept out to sea on a sort of freak wind, and then comes across a boat full of refugees crossing the channel. So it throws her into a very uncomfortable situation, because she needs this boat to herself survive, but it's full of people who she is very scathing and dismissive about. So it created quite an interesting situation for her, but I won't go any further than that with it. But based on, I spend a lot of time on beaches and swimming as well, if I can do so. I was kind of drawing on a few of my own experiences of not being swept out to sea, thankfully, but certainly spending time on beaches.
Oh, you'll have to bring your costume up for the birthday party, because then you can go for a swim.
Yeah, funnily enough, I've already checked out around Whitley Bay, and people are saying there's a harbour just south of Whitley Bay is the place.
Cullercoats, that's where they all go, paddle boarding and kayaking, but swimming as well. But you can swim at Whitley.
Okay, can you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, great long sandy beach. You can swim there too.
Right. Well, I'm bringing my wetsuit, so yeah.
You won't need a wetsuit.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
Do you want to tell us about your plans to launch the anthology? Because you're all going to meet up, aren't you? Will it be your first sort of in-squad meeting?
It is for a while, isn't it? Anne luckily has got great connections with the bookshop near where she lives in Whitley Bay. So you've kindly done all the organising on this one, haven't you, Anne?
It's the first event that they've held, and it's a lovely. As I said, it's a spin-off from Forum, so that it's the same owners. But James, who was assistant manager in Forum Books, is now running The Bound, it's called, in Whitley Bay. And it's lovely young staff, and they're so enthusiastic. So yeah, it's their very first event, and everybody's going to be there, which is amazing. I can't remember the last time everybody was together.
Yeah. I think that was in the Northeast, wasn't it, when we went to
we did the Word in in South Shields. That's right.
Yeah.
But there will be fizz and there'll be cake. not a huge number of people because we're still being quite COVID cautious. So only 30 people in the audience, but with the staff and us as well.
Mm.
Is it going to be broadcast online as well as having the 30 people in the audience? Or?
I think it's more of a party than an event, really. So we'll be there to sign copies of the books because the lucky people who we managed to squeeze in all get a book along with the ticket. So there'll be a little bit of chat, but mostly it'll just be a celebration, a proper launch party for people who've never experienced it.
That's amazing. So we've got a few minutes left. Tell us a little bit about your routes into publication and why you chose crime.
Mm.
Who wants to go first this time?
Shall I go first as the first published?
Yeah.
Yeah, my first book was published in 1986, so a long time ago. And I started writing on a tiny tidal island called Hilbre, which is between the Wirral and North Wales. It was a local authority nature reserve. My husband was warden there. We were the only people living there. No mains electricity, no mains water. So if you weren't interested in birds, and I really wasn't, there wasn't much else to do. So that's where I started writing. And my route to publication, I went into my local library and saw who published the sort of book that I'd written, which was pretty traditional crime, and just sent a couple of them letters. And I think the third publisher I sent the book to bought it. That was Century Hutchinson. And that's how it happened, really. Tiny, tiny advance. But that was good because there was no pressure to sell. And libraries then had proper book funds, so they were able to support debut authors. No hype, no big deal. And that gave me a chance to practice and to write better. And crime, because it was always my comfort reading. If I was fed up or had a cold or been dumped by a boyfriend, I always read crime.
Yes, I was the same about crime. I just always read it. I loved crime novels, introduced by my mum, because she was a complete crime addict. And when I just really wanted to write a crime novel. So I started off writing a historical one, and that was rejected. And then I also wanted to write modern day. So I decided to write a bit of a modern day mystery with a historical background. So that's what I've done ever since.
And my roots into it weren't consciously sort of to write crime. Actually, my first novel was quite a strange. I mean, it fell into the crime category, but it had quite an unusual structure, and the police only play a sort of minor role in it, really. Anyway, when it got picked up by a publisher, I was sort of told, well, this is crime, so you need to familiarize yourself with the genre. So they actually sort of gave me a reading list of authors I needed to know about, because I'd never really consciously targeted crime. I just sort of read anything that caught my attention. So I went away and read all the big names, including Murder Squad members, and then it was only my third book that I started the D.I. Spicer series, which was very much kind of police procedurals set in Manchester, based around this detective. The two novels before that were standalones, where, as I said, the police only played a minor role, really, in the novel. It was more about what was going on in the killer's mind and what was driving them. So yeah, and I've always tried to keep a thread of that going with my police procedurals as well, to try and get an insight into the bad guy as well as the detective hero.
Wow. Let's finish off with what you're currently reading. What would you recommend? Have you read anything recently that's been a really good read?
I'm rattling through the Ali Smith quartet, the Seasons quartet, which See, it looks a bit sort of daunting when you start, because it's quite a lot of stream of consciousness, idiosyncratic punctuation, and no real narrative line. But I'm loving it, and it is actually, once you get into it, it's really accessible. So I've read the first 3, and I'm just about to start Summer, which is the 4th, the last one, and I'm putting it off because I'm enjoying them so much. And it's a mix between the intensely personal and the political. So you get Green and Common in there, and you get Brexit big style in there, but you also get a real sense of the personal of the characters that she's writing about. I think it's just, I've never read anything like it, and it's just brilliant.
Wow.
I'm reading it's a more of a sort of factual, sort of natural history book at the moment, actually, all about Connemara, the region in the west of Ireland. And I set one of my D.I. Spicer novels there, where he ends up traveling over to Ireland, and I visited it once and just love the region. It's so sort of wild and rugged and elemental, and the storms that blow in from the Atlantic. So yes, I've started reading about the region itself and all the sort of different aspects of it. Yeah, so that's my current reading before I go back into a crime novel of some sort, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm reading historical crime at the moment. Andrew Taylor, The Last Protector, set in 1668. It's a wonderful book, featuring rather, well, he's a bit of a footnote in history, Richard Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell's son. And it's a fascinating book, and Andrew Taylor's a wonderful writer, especially of historical.
Yes. Yeah, he's brilliant.
I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Sounds good. I'm reading Myra Duffy. She writes books set on the Isle of Bute.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. All right. Now the Scottish Island author.
I know.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
There was a really horrible murder there, wasn't there, in Bute? A child killer, I think. Yeah. Not that long ago. Yeah, very shocking.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us today. Do you want to finish us off with a little recap about yourselves, your books, and Kate can show off us the Murder Squad anthology cover again?
It's up on, I know it's up on Amazon for pre-order. It's print and Kindle versions. It's up there, so I'm sure.
And it's available on the Forum Books website. So go there, and you might actually get us to sign it if you're quick.
Yeah. Many deadly returns.
Yeah.
Really good title. So thank you again. Thanks for coming to join us for an interview.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great to chat.